The MTG podcast is a virtual space for women and minorities in the tech and creative industries.
Tune in as we explore inspirational,
educational,
and community insights
through different perspectives, expanding the diverse cultures and societies that reflect us.
We're more than a designer.
We're more than our name badge.
We're more than the work we produce. Welcome to the More Than Graphics podcast.
We're that tribe.
Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to the More Than Graphics podcast. I'm Danielle.
I'm Cicely.
And I'm Priscilla.
And together we make this unanimous tribe called MTG. And I love it because it's so filled with so many good things. First off, this is a little bit of a reunion because the three of us have not been like in a window for
a little bit.
So it feels really good to see like the breath of us, right? You're gonna get a lot of that in this episode.
And we still all fit in one window.
I know, right? Shout out to StreamYard for making it happen. Give us that promo code. So I'm so excited that we are having this continued conversation in and around mental health, emotional intelligence, but we have an amazing guest to kind of help really deep dive into a playbook of sorts as we kind of talk more about this topic. But overall, April is all about launch. And I love this word because if you're anywhere in the tech and creative fields or industries, you kind of know launch is kind of either a really powerful word or it's a real like, oh my word. So I like the idea of thinking launch is always a propelling, moving forward, very positive, uplifting kind of word. But there is parts of it that launch is kind of like, I don't know, am I ready? The self-doubt, the imposter syndrome. The list goes on and on and on that comes with that word. So I just kind of want to check in with you ladies. Like, what's up? I feel like it's like a reunion. Like anybody else feeling? I'm feeling it.
I feel the same. Like you said, we haven't been all three of us in the same space in a while, like where we've been able to talk to each other, see each other's faces. So it's good to be back.
I'm for it. What about you, Priscilla?
Oh, you know me. I'm all for it. I just wrote down launch on my thing and I was thinking, at my height, which is under 5 foot, I'm always launching. Reaching for that stuff at the grocery store, always launching.
It's an Olympic sport.
Yeah, it's very dangerous at times.
Oh, my gosh.
I love it. And it's also very timely because we talk about, springtime, we're moving forward. Maybe we are doing that springboard movement. That's for everybody right now, right? We're all reaching at this point. So that's actually a really good comment. Priscilla, good catch.
That's me, Miss Segue.
National Clinical Counselor, LPCC, Derek has experience providing mental health and behavioral health services to individuals, couples, and groups to help clients find meaning and purpose and utilize cognitive, existential, and humanistic approaches. As a certified master life coach, Derek helps educate and inspire leaders and organizations. I enjoy the journey of helping leaders understand not only the why, but also the how of their leadership. Derek works with leaders in various industry-leading organizations, helping them enhance their emotional intelligence, communication skills, and decision-making abilities, helping organizations achieve their goals by prioritizing both leadership and mental health focus. Mental health is a focus of Derek's. For more of his content, you can listen to the Mental Stillness podcast on Spotify, Apple, Google, and YouTube. And you can also stay connected at derekcounsels.com and derekleads.com. Welcome, Derek.
Thank you. So glad to be here.
Yeah, I'm so excited that you're here. So small tidbit, me and Derek have known each other for a long time and our families are pretty close. And it's really cool that I get to see Derek in this way. They're like legit. They're up there, the man of the hour, right? We talked about that for a second. So of this hour. So I love hearing and seeing Derek thrive and do his thing. So I kind of want to go straight for the jugular here. I want to know more about kind of what you help people navigate through and do as a licensed professional clinical counselor.
Yeah, no, great question. Yeah, it's messy, but that's where I feel comfortable in an odd way. I think, the the day in and day out, just trying to help people identify um, how can we just restore a little bit of equilibrium, right? I mean, I think there's a lot of just that can catch people off guard. That's definitely tough to process on your own. And so I feel like a lot of the training in this field is around, um, it's funny. They train you to kind of have some frameworks and evidence based, all the things, which is great. But then when you're sitting across from that person, it's like, I've never been in a situation like this before. I'm saying this as a therapist, let alone the person living that experience. And so I think that's where I think a lot of what I feel like, it's like, how do I be flexible and how do I meet this person where they're at? And there could be somebody who's had a similar, may have the exact same diagnosis on paper, but it's like, but they're still so different, And so how do we just have a constant sense of openness to the moment, to the person, to where they're at in the season they're at, and help them identify. It's not going to do any good if I identify. How can they identify, and I can help support that? What a key next step is to repair something. They're not coming. Typically, I don't see people because they're coming to me because everything's great. It's usually Cicely, you have a fan in the background. It's usually when stuff's hit the fan, I they come to that, and then helping them get healthy then just bleeds into families and just the generational piece. And so getting to play a small part in that, to where they're the hero, I just get to come alongside and support. I just think it's a really interesting and honorable seat to be in for another person. That's how I would answer that.
I love that. There was so much truth in that. And I feel like there's so many things that go unspoken in this territory. Like you said, there's evidence-based, there's frameworks, there's all these kind of given parameters, if you will. But really what it comes down to is just absorbing and understanding and meeting people where they are. And that is a hard craft to do. I mean, we're all parents in this space. We have to meet, a lot of young humans, tiny humans in these spaces where they are. And I think it's so incredible that over time, as we kind of embrace whatever challenges that come, whether for our personal selves or for other people that we serve, it's always really unique and really truly humane in my eyes when we're able to kind of put our own stuff down and willing to walk alongside or take up someone else's path or journey or circumstance and try to just walk with them in that place. Yeah, I'm gonna stop talking. You guys have feedback on this as well?
Derek, I was like nodding my head throughout the whole time you were talking, because I'm like, basically, you're a labor and delivery nurse as well. Like, we have the same job. It's great. So one of the things that stood out that you said was kind of meeting people where they are. Like, I've helped many people at this point give birth. And like, one of the things is that even if you've done it once, it's still like, I'm sure you know this when you see clients, even if they've done something once or gone through something once, it could be they're in a different spot in their life. Like, I had a baby at 18 and now I'm having a baby at 38, or this is my first child and I'm 38, or this is my first child and I'm 25. Like, there's so many different circumstances. And I really like where you said you're meeting people where they are, and very much that we're not rescuing people. We're not the heroes of like their story, that we're just empowering them. In my case, to bring forward life, you're empowering them to maybe start a new chapter in their life, or to, kind of process those things. I thought that was so spot on. I was like, okay, I didn't know he was a labor and delivery nurse too. This is awesome. I didn't know I was
one either. Yeah.
So we do very much of the same job and the same thing. There's what the evidence says, there's what literature says, there's what you learn in school, and then there's the things that just have to happen in the moment because we're humans, and that's how life works. Like, everything is not textbook. I've seen a patient with this condition. I've seen one patient with that condition, right? I've not seen every patient with that condition. So one of the things go ahead. No, you go ahead.
Say, it feels like to me too, it's like there's being in the room with my wife, with that whole experience, there's few things more vulnerable.
Yes, very intimate.
Like the vulnerability, you're meeting someone in the midst of vulnerability. That's
absolutely
and what we do with that. I don't know, is crucial in that moment. So Just add that.
Absolutely, it's sacred. It definitely is. Like someone's, I mean, you're in their case, they're bearing their soul to you. In my case, they're bearing their soul and their loins to me. So I experience a lot in one day.
Important distinction, yes.
Yes, I want to make sure everyone knows that Derek is not really a labor and delivery nurse. He just does the mental work.
Not the
But
physical work.
one of the things that Danielle brought up that made me think about this as well, seeing is that we're all parents. I just wanted to know how being a parent has kind of helped you both launch your career and then also be more empathetic to the clients that you help to serve.
That's really good. Yeah, I think having the I think there's a level of empathy that you don't get until you have kids, right? When you're talking to I think when I'm talking to like mothers, in those settings of like, while no, I'm not a mother, but seeing the impact of children on mothers, even just that level of empathy, I would not have known that unless going through that with my wife, and the kids. And so I think I think just a little bit deeper sense of empathy, whether it's spoken or unspoken, just knowing like that was hard, and being able to connect some of the, a lot of times there's mental illness and issues that arise based on just the season. You mentioned seasons earlier, Cicely, like the season someone's in, and like, like people trying to raise kids, and like that can definitely be a trigger to other things, or uncover some things or resurface some things. And so I think just knowing the impact of the family and kids and parenting definitely helps me when I'm thinking of like, okay, what's really going on here that's diagnosable or not diagnosable. And that's one of the key factors that we filter through is like, okay, like of course they're tired. That's not something that's diagnostic. They're exhausted, and that's not something clinical. They have zero left in the tank, and so sometimes it's even just where if I didn't have that perspective as a parent and as a husband, like it'd probably clinically be able to jump to conclusions, be like, oh, they got this kind of going on, versus no, this other thing's probably the real issue, and this is just some other secondary matters. If does that make sense?
It really does, because you're coming from like both the emotional side of it, this experiential side, plus the education side. So it definitely makes sense. I love that. Thank you.
Yep. Great question.
I wanted to, I like, you guys were talking and I'm like, that one. So I've got already a lot of notes here. Let me sit down for this. No, so I liked when you were saying about meeting where they are and that kind of, and then Cicely was saying some other stuff, but like, cause I know I've been through most of my life, I've had therapy, multiple therapists and stuff like that. And each time I meet a new one, it's like in a different obvious stage. And then just building upon that from the last one. But as you guys were talking, you were talking more about the empathy of you as a parent and, coming in like as either a spouse or something. Derek, I was wondering, so I had one a couple years ago when I was married at the time, and I was we were seeing a therapist, and we got so connected. She said, when I told her I was finally getting a divorce, she told me the next time, she went home and she cried. And she said she was telling her husband, because she said, you worked so hard for it. So it's like, you come invested in that. And I guess I'm wondering, that was making me think about like for you, I mean, is that difficult? I mean, you get to know these people and how do you keep that poker face, or do you just,
Yeah.
I guess if you're virtual, then it's easy. You just turn off the camera, right?
Yeah. No, it's that is really contingent upon the therapist and their therapeutic approach.
Yeah.
So there's some approaches that are very much poker face is a great way to describe it. There's other ones that are more, like going into showing some of your emotions is kind of part of that theoretical framework.
Right.
And so it's very much dependent upon the wiring and kind of the whatever theoretical lens that therapist has adopted. I think whether they show it or not, it's felt.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's definitely there behind the scenes.
Yeah.
But like for my approach, one way that going into going into a relationship with a client and kind of a therapeutic relationship, like in the back of my mind, like again, it's not about me. It's about this is my lens. I should have said that.
Mhm.
Because I try my best to not make it about me. There's this, and I say this early on. Um, I want to equip you to have the tools that you need, whether I'm here or not.
Right.
So when you move, or when it's 2 a.m. and you're feeling some kind of way, or you have some kind of trigger, or your mother-in-law called you, or whatever, whatever's going on, um, this is about you developing and you building. And so there's almost like this graduation, so to speak, when people get to a point to where it's, you know what, you seem like, and this is something I would say, I was like, you seem like that's very different than you would how you handled that 8 months ago. And that's where celebrating, and maybe that means us spacing out our meetings together gives you more opportunity to really see if those skills are where it feels like they might be. But more separation between us at this point may be necessary to really solidify that theory. So that's how I would approach it. It's not I'm getting rid of you, but it's like, hey, we need to give you space to really test and explore, and see where it's at. And then you can always be here. Like if things get hard again, or it's not a vibe, but it's like it kind of, I think of it as it ebbs and flows in season, and that shows up too. I mean, different points of the year, seasonal depression's a real thing. So when we start getting into the shorter days and stuff, I see people kind of resurface back, and it's like, I think we have to have that kind of approach with our people to be like, this isn't a forever thing. It shouldn't be where I'm failing as your therapist, is the way I see it.
Okay, y'all, I just love this so much. Derek, you're just shining, man. I love it. I want to equip you with tools you need, whether I'm here or not. Like, that is very profound to me. And I say that because, one, I personally know you, and I just know your heart for people. But also from a place of, coming from a place of mental health and wellness, coming from a place where we are always in a mental type of, I don't want to say race, but it just seems very pivoted, especially in the realms for tech and realms for creativity, where there's very fast turnaround. There's even quicker burnout, right? We kind of experience that quite a bit in this realm. What are there some like gravitational must-haves as you're kind of, for someone who is just very new to the relative space of seeking help or therapist or therapy period?
Mm. Yeah, I think there's similar to what we said earlier from Cicely, you were saying, like, just because you've seen somebody that, maybe at first looked like a similar situation, or, I know how this is going to play out because of XYZ, I experienced in my career. I think just as we need to be open to it being not what we think, I think someone stepping into therapy for the first time, they probably have an idea of what they think it's going to be. And so, fit goes two ways. Like, I think just because you try one therapist and it was a horrible experience, I would just say, like, hey, like, maybe the theoretical approach, or some of the things I was saying earlier that makes each therapist a little different. I would just encourage people to not give up on therapy just because of maybe a time where you didn't have a good fit with a therapist. And so I think that's a big one. I mean, just because we've seen that with doctors before, right? Like, you go to a doctor and you're like, we're going through that with my son now with a dentist. I hope they don't listen to this. Where, where it's like, he had a great experience with the second dentist. The first one, we were like, we might be switching practices, but had we done that, we never would have, experienced this other dentist. And so that's what I would say to somebody. If it's somebody we know, I would just encourage that kind of mentality. I think that's important.
Oh, I love this. I love this, Derek. And this is also something that I've kind of talked about a little bit, that I'm doing more of on LinkedIn, like better sharing the fact that our circumstances and our experiences come with lessons behind it. And because of those lessons, we're able to pivot faster, better, more dynamically to enhance our landscape. And when I say landscape, I mean the landscape of our lives, the landscape of our minds, our emotional and physical well-being. And so I really love that you even say that. No shout out to the dentist, but it's one of those situations where, we want to be able to take the things that we've learned and pivot from it to better our lives. And so even if you, like you mentioned before, maybe you've had a not so good experience with one therapist, doesn't mean we label them all. And if anyone better understands that, I do believe it's us more sensitive creatives and it's us more simple techies out there that better understand not to label a book by its cover, right? So I really encourage that to anyone in listening range who's listening to this, is maybe probability thinking, speculating as to whether or not they should go that route and seek the help that they truly need. I would highly encourage you to think about these terms and these conversations that we're having today, because that could be the tipping point for you to pivot to do something different that could benefit your life, that could benefit maybe even generations beyond you because of the small step that you took in this moment. Okay. I have a question. I don't know if, is it okay, ladies, if I jump in and ask it? Like, we're talking about launch. And so you've recently launched a book, which I absolutely love. And I kind of wanted to, is it okay if I read like a little excerpt about defining resilience? Because it's my favorite. I underlined it.
Yeah.
Which is important to me, because if I underline it, it means it's really important. So defining resilience. Mental resilience has become an essential trait for leaders, managers, business owners, and supervisors. The ability to bounce back from setbacks, adapt to change, and maintain optimal performance in the face of adversity is what sets apart successful leaders. And I really vibe with that, because as a leader, as many of us are leaders, it's really important for us to not only have the right mental framework, but also being able to provide the right mental framework, or better mental framework for others, so that they too can acclimate, they too can be successful in their own ways and rights. So I kind of want to ask you, how do you define launch? What does that look like to you?
It's hard to think of launch without thinking of a rocket. Yeah, I would think, I would say this, like, if I, bare bones definition, like what immediately comes to mind is like direction and intensity. I think if I'm spaceships kind of launching, like, direction's probably pretty important. Or you want to go to the moon, or you want to go to Neptune? I don't, whatever. That's probably important to what direction do you want to go to, and then also, like, if I'm trying to get to 15,000 feet, that's a different level of intensity than if I'm trying to get to the moon. And so I think, I don't know if there's other factors, but in my basic Eastern Kentucky mind, I think it's direction and intensity. And so,
why does that remind me of potato gun? Like, for real.
There you go.
Direction and intensity. How much hairspray and ignition can you put in a single barrel there? That's how we did it back in the day.
There we go.
We put the potato in, we put the aerosol in there, and we lift that thing, and woo!
Turns out a potato can go pretty quick out of a potato gun too. It can do some damage.
Hashtag potato gun, everybody.
I was making a note about that. I think that's so very important to, like, not only, like, when we talk about launching in general, it's not just like, okay, we know that we need to do something, right? But what are the tools to get there? Where are we trying to go? What are the methods to get there? I think that's really important. I always joke that, again, like, everything it goes back to birthing for me, clearly, because of where I am. But when I talk about launch, like, with patients, like, you're launching a couple of different things at birth. You're launching this baby out of your body, number one, but you're launching a different aspect of your life as well. So I think when we think about launch, a lot of people maybe don't think about the changes that may happen. Like, you may be a different person at the end of that launch than you were when you first started, or, the tools that you need during the launch and towards the end of that period may be different than the tools that you needed at the beginning. So I think it's really important, especially to kind of focus on that direction, to talk about the direction, both in therapy, both in business. I think that's really important. So I didn't have a question. I just wanted to make a comment, but I think that's really a great call out.
Finding that mute button. Cicely and I are always finding the mute button. Well, with this conversation that we're having, and I'm thinking about the word launch, it does make me think about, with mental health, is like the triggers and stuff, and how they launch us. Because sometimes, I think launching, we do think of it as a positive thing. And although I do think triggers, even though they are kind of negative, I do think that they are necessary in order for us to launch forward, because I know like recently I've been launched. I'll be launched. It's actually a softer term to use than trigger, right? I've been launched into a different, rethinking things differently and handling things differently. And, I know for me personally, just being able to have that, that help with like therapy and mental wellness and stuff, that does help, kind of soften those launches and triggers and stuff, and makes it, just a lot easier. And again, back to that place where you're saying meeting where they are. Because I know like these things that I may be further ahead from where I was before, but maybe those launches / triggers, they affect me a lot differently than they had been before. And whether or not, I know recently for me, it's been in a kind of a darker place, but I'm able to handle it differently. And so it's kind of like a wild, I'm kind of going through a wild existential thing right now, but yeah, I love that I love that we have this word for this topic. It's amazing. It's wonderful.
Can I add something to that?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, I wonder too, like this idea of launch is like, if you think about this from even in your all space, I'm sure as creatives, like you guys, if you think about your career and even this podcast, there's a level of vulnerability that comes with launching something.
Mm-hmm.
It's like you don't know what it's gonna, like I say it in the beginning of my podcast early on. I just said, I don't know how you came across this podcast, but I'm glad you did. I don't know where it's gonna lead to, but I'm here for it. And it's kind of that kind of there's a level of risk that you're going to learn a lot about yourself. Like when you're putting something out there, there's a level of yourself you're putting out there if it's really authentic and genuine, and that opens some doors of vulnerability that's way safer not to launch, because you're going to get exposed, right? And it's like, but I guess it's more of the mindset of like, it's like, but what if I don't? But what if I don't get my thoughts out there in a podcast or in the playbook? It's like, yes, I just think there's even in the things that expose some things that are painful or dark, to use your word, Priscilla, it's like there's still some kind of growth I'm crazy enough to think that's going to come out of that, even if it's painful or hard.
I feel like this is a good segue.
Yeah. Hey, Derek.
Hello.
Hi.
Good to see you.
Yeah, great seeing you. Could you share with us a time when you had to grow up or out of something, and what did it teach you?
When I had to grow up or grow out of something, what was the last part?
And what did it teach you?
Ooh. I think probably I think there's a level of growing up, you learn certain things. I think there comes a point in all of our lives where we start to question, like, what, we count the blessings of our upbringing, but we also start to be like, that's not something I want to repeat, And so I think for me, I mean, all of us are parents here. I think that's where the rubber meets the road when you have kids, particularly. And I've got 2 young kids. I'll probably forever say they're young, so I'd trick myself to thinking they're not really growing up. And I would say that. I would say growing up and be like, okay, it's still there comes a point where you still have to own, what does this mean moving forward, regardless of what you had or didn't have, right? And so I think that aspect from a parenting lens is really interesting, because then you're starting to create those things that then they're going to future evaluate and try to see if they want to replicate it or not. And I think as a dad, I want them to be able to look at me and be like, man, he didn't do it all right, but he has a lot going on that I want to replicate. And I get to choose that and be that. And if I didn't have it modeled, where can I go and learn? Where can I, how can I proactively pursue that? And so I think that I don't know that it's like a pivotal point where I had to make a shift. It's like, I think I always need to be making that because my kids need something different from me, or my wife needs something different from me. And so, yeah, I think just kind of more taking charge and seeking help and support when you need it. And if that's professionally or relationally or whatever that looks like. And I think really probably that really started hitting home after kids came along for me in a very real way.
I love your response to this, and I so appreciate it when there is, again, that vulnerability. We talk about that a lot on this podcast, and I love the fact that you also exemplify this on your own podcast. So, y'all, this is my plug for Mental Stillness with Derek Sloan. I need you to check this out. It's on Spotify. It's on all the places. Listen, because it's amazing. I love this level of vulnerability that you speak of specifically in these areas of how to be a good leader. And in being a good leader, there is a level of peeling back these layers, saying and doing things that are a level of discomfort for the benefit and of not only ourselves, but the other people in the room and in the spaces. And so I love that you say that all the time on your podcast, actually, that I don't know how you got here, but I'm glad that you're here. And that always is so welcoming to me, because when I hear even, okay, first off, let's just talk about voice in general, okay? I don't know if Derek is a professional voiceover artist or not, but when he comes out on this podcast, he's kind of like, this is Derek. And I'm just like, yeah, smooth jazz, baby. Like, I'm for it.
That sounded way more Barry White than I think I really sound like. Thank you.
It's so good. I love it. And it kind of emulates calmness and stillness. It automatically lowers my blood pressure just by listening to the smoothness and the sincerity in your voice. And so when you talk about even these bigger topics, as we talk about specifically, the art of motivation was part 1, was really good. I specifically loved that you had, okay, so I didn't listen to the full special guest with Jeff, but that's the last one that I was on that I was
Really
listening
good.
partially to. I know, right? Like, I'm just like, okay. Let's talk about the sensitive and the stoic leader episodes. Those were game changers for me. As soon as I was listening to those words, it really created this level of deeper empathy that I felt like I was already doing, but clearly there's more work for me to do. And so I was just like, wow, like these little nuggets, they're not long. They're like 10, 15 minutes, maybe, that I feel like are just helpful ways that people can better understand how to create not only mental wellness for yourself, but good practices for it to trickle down, right? Good leaders flow it down. Like they just start with themselves and they let it just kind of go down the pipeline there. So I really am inspired in a lot of ways. All the different things that you discuss about on your podcast specifically. Is there one thing that kind of tripped you up though? Like on the podcast, was there one topic that you're like, that's really hard for me to talk about, but I'm going to do it anyway?
Yeah, I think that there's a level of back to the vulnerability piece. Like I think when there's people still in my orbit that know me, that knew me in different seasons, and like on the podcast where I talk, not, I don't know that trip me up, but I'm always mindful of like, I don't know who's going to hear this. I mean, you all do that too, right? And it's like, um, when I talk about the sensitive leader, and I was pretty vulnerable about even just some things going on with my teeth when I was younger, right? And so, there's a lot of issues, and I was always called I'm being too emotional, or maybe being a little bit gaslit here and there, and would respond a certain way, but there wasn't a language for it, there wasn't education around it. Mental health was not talked about where I grew up, and that's a big reason that I feel like it pushed me into the realm that I'm in. And so I would say that that's the one of like knowing that vulnerability in this kind of medium, I can't control who logs in and listens to stuff. And so there's yeah, I would say just the types of stories and things are pretty selective that don't indict, and just trying to be mindful. I hope that those people are listening. I hope, because I feel like there's opportunity. I don't know, we all have opportunities, right? And so I think that that's the one thing of like, if you're going to be vulnerable, it's kind of like I don't know that you can kind of, always pick and choose, but you kind of do. And so that's where I still don't really know my footing with it. But I just want it to be authentic. So
You clearly
I hope
checked.
I authentically answered your question.
You did. You checked all the boxes. Thanks, Derek. I love that.
I think mentioning like the vulnerability and also like mentioning kind of what you do and don't share, very important in this space. And very much like you said, like if you come from an upbringing where certain things weren't talked about or things were taboo to be talked about, like it may be therapeutic for you, but it may, trigger granny or mom and dad or cousins or aunts and uncles because, we're at a different space. Maybe you've healed or maybe you've learned some things, like you said, that you were, now, like, oh, gaslighting was the word for that, or this is what I was going through. It wasn't just a phase or it wasn't just something I was going to get over. Like I've now learned that I had to cope with this thing, deal with this thing. So I definitely agree that sometimes like having a podcast, especially, or sharing any part of your life, like to the world on social media can be very vulnerable. But I do feel like you said, you have to be authentic. You have to live in your truth, right? Like I always say, there's a lot of sides to the story. There's your perception of what happened, their perception of what happened, what actually happens, and then whatever higher being you may believe in, what they know to be true is like, the ultimate truth. But at the end of the day, we all have different reactions and feelings surrounding the same situation. All four of us can have the same situation happen to us at the exact same time, but our perception of it's going to be different. How we deal with it's going to be different. How we launch from that experience is also going to be different. So I think it's very important that you mention that. And your truth may not necessarily be someone else's truth, or how you experience it may not be their perception of it, but it's true for you. So as long as you're true to that, that's being true to yourself. And that's really all you can do.
Yep. And I think something like a book or podcast or whatever the thing is that creatives are putting out there, there's also something like we're putting it out there because we want it to benefit someone. I think there's some internal benefit of like, gathering your own thoughts and part of your own journey and healing for sure. But it's also like, I don't know, helping other people kind of who I would never meet or have a conversation with, but they might listen to the podcast and there's something that I lived, whether good or wrong, or a lens that I could put out there based on my lived experience that could benefit them. And I mean, that's vulnerability is worth it because it impacts, has the potential to impact and, help somebody.
It's the human experience, right? It's a part of the whole human experience.
Mm-hmm.
With that, I do have a question that kind of popped up. So when, after wading through all the heavy things that we deal with on a regular basis in life, what do you do for self-care, especially in a profession where you deal with emotions on a regular basis, you deal with helping people kind of walk through dark times or just things that are not fun all the time? What do you do for self-care to kind of help yourself through those situations and just help yourself, I guess, stay on the lighter side of things as well?
Sure. Yeah, I think there's physical things like running. I mean, just drinking a lot of water, which I try to do. Don't always do great, but there you go. Cheers. There's just some day-to-day things for sure. I think just for me, I think it's knowing what recharges my batteries, and like being with my kids recharges my batteries. Being with my wife recharges my batteries, and so I think sometimes I think it's finding those day-to-day things like that are just kind of sprinkled throughout. It's not sure. I would love to go on a bunch of trips all the time and do all the things, but it's doing the day-to-day stuff feels definitely more attainable. And so there's, how do I know what works for me? And, having connection with friends and family and, in this season of life with young kids, like it's usually involving them, which is what I want. Right. And so, and I think it's people knowing you well enough and making sure that there's a level of vulnerability with those who do know you well, so they can even speak into some things like, hey, like my wife did it the other day. She's like, hey, I got the kids, I got dinner. You kind of go, run a couple errands, and she could just tell it was like a long day with a lot of stuff kind of going on that was just on. So I think it's also having some advocates around you that can speak into those things where maybe I think I'm hiding it well, or it hasn't really clicked with me yet, but it's clicked with her, right? And so having those kind of people around you and trusting them to kind of support you in that process too.
Having good teammates, right? I think that's kind of how we talk about it in this book. I love it. The Resilience Playbook definitely is filled with all kinds of really cool assessments. It's really cool. It's filled with a lot of cool just thoughts in and around mental health and mental wellness, and how, and again, focusing on that leadership aspect and how we can all be good players. So I really love the echoing of all of that as you speak. Even it's just kind of like, oh, it's all in here. Like, can't tell you enough, y'all. Check out this book. It's really cool. I can't wait to put this in the show notes for more people to see it. So I kind of wanted to ask almost kind of like a roundabout question here. And this is really kind of like, how do we sum up the encouragement part? And then Priscilla, if you want to ask the last question, I'll put an asterisk next to it so you know what that is, the star. So you know it. But for from your experience and the industry success that you've had thus far, what encouragement can you offer our listeners who are seeking to launch something this year?
Yeah, I would say if there's someone that's a perfectionist, don't let that be a barrier to launching. I think some people think it has to be perfect and polished, and I mean, even with that playbook, Danielle, I'm pretty sure that the very last page of that, the version you have, there's a misalignment thing, and again, my heart's like, here's something I want to put out there. I want it to be the best, but I'm also okay with adjusting as I go. And so whether that's a podcast, a book, whatever it is, like, I don't know. It's like I think there's a way that you can be excellent without having to be perfect. It's like, how do I just, Vince Lombardi would say that in football. He's like, let's shoot for perfection and we might hit excellence. I love that. And so how do we get ourselves out there and be okay with adapting and moving? And my thoughts may change on some things. I may put a podcast out there, and that's okay. I can always put a new episode out and update it, right? It's not there's not something there that's, at least in my realm, that's irreparable. And so I would just say that to the perfectionists in there, because there's definitely a part of that that's in my space, in my mental space, where I've had to overcome that through the years of like, so that would be one thing. And I don't know. I think, again, just making sure you have whatever your thing is, authenticity is what's going to sustain it. If you put something out there, if you say, I work with a lot of leaders in some pretty successful industries, and in the high level leaders, one of the things that I work with them on all the time is, you've got to be clear on your vision and be living that vision, or no one's going to know which version of you to follow. So how do you authentically do whatever your thing is and let it come from a genuine place, whether that's to a small crowd or to the world? It's just, as long as it's authentic, I think that's the metric of success, not how many people are listening to my podcast analytics and all that, which is tempting to go there. But is it authentic? And put it out there if it is, in simple terms.
I love that. Thank you so much for that. I feel like a lot of us in the spaces are very much, kind of focused on sometimes the numbers and the impact, which is great. Impact is wonderful. I think that's a good measuring stick in a lot of areas, but also this level of authenticity, this level of being vulnerable, of peeling back a lot of ourselves and, really putting ourselves out there. Sometimes we know, sometimes that feeling, that hesitant feeling of this is going to hurt, or I'm not prepared, or the doubt. We talk about the, imposter syndrome and all of that. So, I just really appreciate those words. Thank you.
Can I add to that real quick?
Please.
So there's some really interesting leadership data points that come out every couple of years. And one of the most recent one, and this is a global one, multiple countries, like I think there's over 30, 35 countries that are part of this, like thousands of leaders. Two of the things that are kind of highlighted that mid-level people in the organizations are saying about their managers, their supervisors, is like, we need a couple things here universally. And those two things were role clarity and more vulnerability for my manager. And so if you think about it's people who want to know that a human is leading me, that they have the same stress, pressure, pain points that maybe I have. And then also, like, what's winning look like for me? And so I'm just speaking to the leaders in the spaces, like, if we can lead with vulnerability, and then also help them define what winning is and let them have clarity of that, like, that's gonna serve a lot of people in really healthy ways.
That is so cool. Thanks for sharing that.
So what did you want to be when you were growing up, and does it reflect what you do now?
Yeah. I didn't have that kind of ability to foresee for sure. I always wanted to help people in some way. Like I thought I was going to go to the medical field, not to be a labor and delivery nurse. Um, but and that even, and I remember eighth or ninth grade, I went and volunteered at a high school in the summer and I signed up for radiology. Well, I learned real quick that endoscopy is very different than radiology. They stuck me in the endoscopy part of the hospital, and I found out real quick I don't want to do this. Maybe a different area in the but I always knew it's somehow attached to people. Like I get my energy off people. I don't get, I would be miserable in isolation. So I think that way I didn't know what helping would look like, but every part of my career, there's always been that piece of just, am I growing, and how can I help someone else grow? And that's really the playbook. I mean, it's condensed and short for a reason. The podcasts are 10 minutes for a reason. How do I take something that could be confusing? How can I simplify that and deliver that to somebody else to help them in their journey? So I think that's looked like a lot of different ways in my settings, whether that's mental space or leadership space or both. So people, but had no idea the different vehicles to do that at all. It's just kind of taking that next step that's presented itself.
I love that. I think that's so. I like one of the things we've found when asking that question is even if you're not doing like I think we've had people who wanted to be like backup dancers and singers. Even if you're not doing the exact thing that you thought you were going to be doing or that you were drawn to, we still realize that like all the people who answer this question, we're still somehow involved and tied to whatever was the kind of deeper meaning of what you like to do, like having that connection with people. So you still have that. So I think that's wonderful. I love that. That's my outro, but I think that is wonderful. And I love that you're still doing what you've always been drawn to, what feels natural and authentic for you. I love that for you. I think that's awesome. World. So I'm so happy that we had this connection, had this chance.
Absolutely. I didn't know this was my future, but now I know this is my next season of helping.
Yes, and that's wonderful. It's a new season for me too. So we're in it together. So if you need any tips or need anything, I've got you.
I'll be next time you see me, I'll be bougie nurse boy.
Ooh, I love it. Oh my God, that made my day. Oh my gosh. Well, I hope you and the kids and the wife all take care, but best of luck with everything. And again, thank you so much for this amazing conversation. And I appreciate all three of you.
Derek, for all the things that people may want to reach out to you, find out more information about your podcast and the playbook, where can they directly go to find all that information?
Yeah, so you plug the podcast is called Mental Stillness. And so I would just say if you're a leader, I mean, in the description of it, I try to bring the conversation of mental health and leadership a whole lot closer than they typically are. So that's the goal of it. So it's a good framework to lead others or to increase your sensitivity around that. You can definitely get that on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, Amazon, and Google, which Google Podcasts is going away. But so that's those spaces. And then as far as the playbook, the resilience playbook, you can go to the derekleads.com. And so there's ways to order directly from there, and information on the podcast there as well. And then LinkedIn, I'm pretty active on LinkedIn as well. And just putting, you can see just post where I just type out personal experiences and try to type out some, again, just some authentic stories of things that I'm experiencing that, again, try to give some simple takeaways from those stories. And so those are probably the three main connection points.
I love following you on LinkedIn just because of the stories. I'm always attached to the stories. I love hearing the feedback and the mental thoughts and notes that we can all intentionally do to work a little more in depth, right? We work inward and it shows outward. And so I really love the fact that you continually showcase that across all the things that you do. So Derek, this is where we're going to get real chummy in here. We're going to shoot you out a question. and then you tell us exactly what random thought pops into your brain. So this should be fun. I'm excited about this part.
I think I already know. I already know the first. I know the first answer to this. Okay. Or I'm hoping. So after you tell me, I'm going to tell you what I think you should have said. No. So if you were a superhero, what would your superpower be? And what would your superhero name be? Because I think you already told us.
Oh yeah, Bougie Nurse Boy, definitely.
Yes, that's your superhero name.
But my superhero power would not.
Oh.
I guess could be connected to that. Probably not. I think time travel.
Oh yeah.
That is
I'm
so
gonna
clever.
I'm gonna say that's a good option. Either direction, past, or future.
So like a Flash or a Doctor Strange? Are we going like dimensional?
Doctor Who.
This is getting too
Doctor
deep.
Who. Oh my gosh, Whovians.
Yeah. No, yeah, whatever. I would like, I don't want to be stuck in having to go back or forward. I want the option to do both because I think both give you different.
Doc Brown. More like
So whoever that. Yeah, there you go.
Doc Brown.
Which I did just sit there and I just did see Back to the Future on Broadway.
All right.
Phenomenal.
Yes.
So
yeah,
I guess Bougie Nurse Boy.
That would be great. I mean, I could see, B&B. So Danielle and I will already whip up a logo for you and everything.
Love it.
Yeah. Okay. And then I also know the answer to this next one. So I don't know why it's a flash round when I flash because I know the answers. So what's your go-to karaoke Barry White song? Just kidding. And can you give us a quick rendition if you dare?
Oh, wow. Ooh, that's tough. I've got stories that come to mind, and I'm trying to figure out which one really moved the heart of the audience more. My wife and I, on multiple occasions, have sung "My Heart Will Go On" by Celine Dion in karaoke settings.
I think I've witnessed this.
But she takes the more tenor lower part, and I falsetto the higher part. It's the harmony you didn't know you needed in that song. And so that I would say that one, for me to share that, brings us back to vulnerability.
It does.
It does. Oh man, I'm laughing so hard.
Yeah.
Which is a wonderful segue to the next one.
Yeah.
If you had to survive a zombie apocalypse, what 3 items would you grab from your home before making a run for it? Besides your Celine Dion
I would
mixtape.
Yeah. I mean, are people things we would grab? I mean, both of my kids, I would have them under my arm. Does that count? Or are we thinking more things without a heartbeat?
Let's think of things without a heartbeat because that's
okay.
That's
Ooh. I think my my vulnerability. My dad gave me a guitar before he passed away. I would take that. I think my laptop, because a lot of my world's on my laptop. And what's another one? Tax documentation for the potential future audit that may happen. I'm an anxious person. In no order. Things, like,
that was so type A. Can I just say that out loud? That was perfect.
That would probably be it. So.
I hope your wife is listening to this episode because she's gonna laugh out loud when she hears those things. Like, yep, that's him.
That's him.
Well, Danielle, speaking of laughing, Derek, can you share an embarrassing moment from your past that you can laugh about it now?
Oh yeah. Which one? So this came up recently because my on the 100th day of school, the kids dress up and all things. And so my son was like really anxious, like about wearing, like, his shirt had fish. He put 100 fish or 50 fish and 50 other sea creatures painted. Sarah helped him. My wife, she's a very creative person, so helped him come up with this. And he was really anxious about wearing it. And anyway, just in talking him through that, I said, well, here's one thing I want you to consider. My brother and I went to the YMCA camp when we grew up, and we were supposed to dress up. They had a local wrestler who was bringing a bunch of people in and having a wrestling match at day camp, which I know, Danielle, you love that idea. And so we were supposed to dress up. So my brother and I dressed up like the Bushwhackers. Okay. Familiar? Okay.
Yes.
So we dress up like that, and we get there, we walk in, we dressed up on the wrong day.
Oh.
And so we go rolling in all our glory, like walking in like, they did. And people were just like, everybody at the same time, like, what? And so we kind of had an interesting experience there. We had to go to the bathroom. We're like licking the stuff off of our bodies, and like, it still didn't help that I had this like shirt on that I cut that had hardly any fabric on it. So yeah, I would say, because that's top of mind, I was telling my son, like, hey, at least I know today is when you're supposed to dress up. It was kind of my point to him, and so that's where that was pretty embarrassing.
Well, I feel like
you laugh about it now, though.
Oh yeah.
Well, see, Danielle, now I want to skip ahead to this other question instead. Is what's the weirdest or most unexpected item on your bucket list, and why is it there?
Weirdest? Ooh, this is making me think I need to have a bucket list. I don't have a weird thing. I would love to go to the birthplace of golf and walk the hallowed grounds of some of those early golf courses in Scotland and Ireland. I love the game of golf, and I think that there's something again, not weird, but I think bucket list. I think there's a trip with some of my key people who I golf with and get to do something like that is definitely on my bucket list, which maybe other people think it's weird if they're not golfers. But
I'm not a golfer, but that sounds really cool.
Are you in a kilt or no kilt?
TBD.
All right.
I'm 6'5", so I'm on the other end, Priscilla. You were talking about your height earlier. I don't know if I could rock a kilt comfortably. As windy as it is over there too. Kudos to them.
So, if you could have dinner with any historical figure, dead or alive, who would it be? And what's the one burning question you'd ask him?
Abraham Lincoln. I talk about him in my podcast quite a bit. And I would ask him similar to, I talked about this in the podcast. I would love to know how he viewed his leadership. He referred to himself as strange. And so I'm curious what he thought about himself that was strange. And just be a fascinating thing to think about for the impact he had and all that he did for so many other people. This internal battle of feeling like off or out of place is just really interesting for that. I don't think you would, it's been written about, but like getting to hear that directly from him would be pretty interesting. So I think you listened to that episode, Danielle, and
I did.
Kind of interesting. Some of the ways that he led and how other people didn't know where to place him in his leadership, right? So
that's a great answer. I love it. And I love that episode too. It was very powerful.
That would fit with your superpower if you can travel back and get them, right?
Look at
then
that.
You can ask anybody anything.
I don't know if I would get a sit down with him if I showed up as bougie nurse boy though.
He wouldn't know how to pronounce bougie.
Service would be like, I don't know about this.
But think about that superpower. Then you could definitely survive the zombie apocalypse. You could keep going back and getting more stuff if you forget. When your laptop, when the battery, go back and get that
I wouldn't need the tax documents because I can go back and get it if I need it. If I get audited, I can just go back and get it.
Change a couple things.
Exactly.
Well, I'm done with those flash questions. Weren't they amazing?
Those were great. Kept me on my toes there.
Yes, that's what we like to do around here.
Yeah. My goodness. Well, Derek, thank you so much for your time, your energy, your influence, your wisdom today. It's been such a breath of fresh air. If there is something from this episode that really encouraged you or inspired you, or just really kind of triggered a new thought or a new action, let us know. Tell us in the comments. Tell us in our social feeds. Follow us on LinkedIn and Facebook as we continue to echo more conversations around launch and all the cool things that Derek is doing, both on his podcast and in his resilience playbook. Priscilla, is there any final words of wrap up that you would like to offer?
No, I don't think so. This was so great. I loved it. And I love it all did come full circle, all the weaving and everything.
It's the beauty of it. It is.
Like it was planned.
Okay.
But thank you all, sincerely. Thank you all for allowing me to connect and talk about these things that are important.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
All right. So if the rest of you all continue to follow us on MTG the podcast on Instagram, Facebook, or LinkedIn, and we'll catch you next time on the next episode. So thanks for watching.
And just like that, the episode ends, but the convo has just begun.
Thanks for listening to the MTG podcast.
We want to hear from you. If you enjoyed our podcast, give it a review on your listening app of choice.
Continue to follow us across MTG social.
And look out for bonus content releases throughout the year. This podcast is produced by Octane Design Studios.
Until next time, friend.